In today's episode, we're going to dive into the game changing, innovative food technology by the founders of Foodini, a tech solution that revolutionizes food ingredients, allergens, diets, and all of the different things that over half of the US population struggles with. These guys have built a amazing solution that I had no idea was such a huge challenge within the restaurant industry until these guys got in and shared all of the things that it can help not only a restaurant operator, but the technologists that are behind it, as well as your consumers. Lots of game changing advice that these guys give. And so if you're not already using a solution like theirs, you need to check it out. If you don't know me, my name is Jeremy Julian. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for CBS North Star. We wrote the North Star point of sale solution for multi units. Please check us out at cbsnorthstar.com. And now, on to the episode. Welcome back to the Restaurant Technology Guys podcast. I thank everyone out there for joining. As I like to say each and every time, I know you guys have got lots of choices, so thank you guys for hanging out. Today is an episode that I'm excited for you guys to hear about because Dylan and Erica have some really cool stuff that they've been doing in the space, and it's become more and more prevalent. And so I'm excited to hear really their take on what it is that they're trying to solve for and then how they're solving it and why they think they're different. But Erica, why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction? Who's Erica? Then pass it over to your co-founder. We'll talk a little bit about kind of your guys' background and how this came to be, and then we'll start to share with our audience what it looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having us on. So my name's Erica. I've been in the restaurant tech world for about 15 years now. I got my start at a company called Campus Food. It was the first online ordering to come to college campuses at the time. We were sending faxes to restaurants, but going door to door, signing up a bunch of them. Through that, went to New York to their kind of sales floor, a bunch of people calling college campuses around the country, had that experience for a summer. And I met some of the team, the founders of Seamless in New York. They had just sold Seamless to Aramark and we're starting a new company called Single Platform. So Single Platform, I was one of about number 5. We basically built the plumbing for menu data on the internet. So prior, when you would look up a restaurant, you would see name, address, phone number, and if you were lucky, a PDF of the menu. And we basically built a menu schema that we would then syndicate out to all the search engines, Google, Yahoo, Bing, Yelp, Foursquare, TripAdvisor, who later bought the business. But that was where I started going around to all the conferences, working with a lot of the big restaurant groups. We worked with Darden, Brinker, and just really good experience there. After that, missed the early days, the early kind of building days, and I met the founder of Slice, a local pizza app. So joined Alir and the Slice team, also right around number 5, grew that from about $1 million to $60 million in revenue to about 12,000 pizzerias throughout the country. Worked with a lot of mom and pops. Premise there, help local chains compete against the big, or help local pizzerias compete against the big chains, economies of scale, helping get better prices, better online ordering. And then, from there, a few others. We were at Seated, one of the early players in dynamic pricing. And then Odeco, which is similar to Slice, focused on coffee shops, more on the back of house supply side. But it was while I was there that I met Dylan. Dylan, why don't I actually pass it over? Good.
Yeah. Before you go, Dylan, there's probably some level of therapy. You're not only startup, but startup in restaurant tech. So there's something there, Erica, that probably I'm teasing just because I've been in restaurant space for almost 30 years on the tech side, and the people that keep going back to not only restaurants but restaurant startups, there's special breed.
There's something wrong with us, but at the same time,
like I said, I could probably be a multimillionaire if I was just a therapist for restaurant people that tried to get out that couldn't get out. Sorry, Dylan, you want to introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, sure. My background is quite different to Erica's in that I wasn't in restaurant tech at all before this endeavor. And as you can tell from accent, Irish corporate lawyer by trade. So I worked for a top tier corporate law firm, had the Apples, Googles, Facebooks of the world as my clients initially, ended up specializing in investment funds. And then that took me to Australia, which is actually where I initially started the business. My angle and where I came at it was the consumer side. So celiac, diagnosed when I was 10, and so experienced the consumer problem of trying to navigate dining out for most of my life. And just over time was getting more and more frustrated with how is it still so difficult to understand what is in a menu item in a restaurant? Like, why is that so hard? Why is that information not available? And initially started the company through that consumer lens in terms of trying to solve the problem purely for the consumer, but then over time realized that you can't solve for the consumer without solving it for the restaurant because the data just doesn't exist. And that's when I connected with Erica, we put that puzzle together and realized, okay, we think we understand how we can actually solve this properly at scale. And that's my whistle stop background.
I love it. I guess share I don't think either one of you guys during that brief intro shared the name of the product and kind of what is it. So why don't we take a step back? I love the background. I love the history. And I know why don't we clue our listeners in? That's great. They're now sleuthing out. Okay, he's celiac. She's in restaurant tech. Tell me more. What exactly have you guys created and what is it? What is the big problem that we're trying to solve for?
Do you want to take that or will I? I'll go. The company's called Foodini, like Houdini, but food. And so we essentially are powering ingredient level transparency across the entire food ecosystem. So we have a multitude of different solutions. We work directly with restaurants, hotels to take their menu data, tag it with the correct ingredients and then allergens and dietaries, and then power a digital personalized menu for consumers across over 100 different diets and allergens. So a consumer can scan a QR code on the menu, or they can click a button on the website and say gluten-free, peanut allergy, vegan, shellfish allergy, save. And it instantly will be told, here are the 10 items you can eat. Here are the 10 items you can eat with a modifier and what that modifier is. And here are the 10 items you can't eat and why. So personalized menu experience. We also can work with, and we do work with stadiums and broader environments. We call them micro environments, schools, universities, that kind of vertical. And also we have APIs that can power personalization for online ordering as well. So those are the three main segments that we work in.
I love it. And I know we talked prior to hitting the record button. It feels like a burgeoning space that more and more people are coming into. I guess I'd love for you to walk our listeners through, what do you guys traditionally see when you guys engage with a restaurant brand? Last night, I happened to be having dinner with a partner. He just went through this whole like food thing where he's trying to migrate his diet to something that's healthier for him. And he was struggling to figure out what was in because he had they weren't quite allergies that were going to make him sick, but they were going to make him not feel good the next day type of thing. And so we were talking through that. And literally, it was just a conversation over dinner last night. And he's, unfortunately, I can't really tell. And so I'd love for you guys to walk through. Most of our listeners out there are going to be restaurant owners or people that are in the restaurant leadership space. How do people do it today? And then let's talk about how Foodini can help bridge that gap to where people are at.
I'll just mention on the consumer side first, and then I'll pass to you on the restaurant. But on that point, when we started this initially, we had just the big 9 allergens, and the initial hypothesis was that'll cover nearly everything. Jeremy, the amount of emails we were getting from like day one in terms of, but I have a strawberry allergy, I have a kiwi allergy, what about I'm trying to go onto a keto diet, I'm actually doing low FODMAP now because I've got health issues, like how do you help me do that? That was the trigger to realize it's not just about people with food allergies that are the big 9. It's about half the population that has some form of dietary requirement, be that an allergen, be that an intolerance, be that a lifestyle diet that they want to follow. The TAM is just so much bigger than most people realize, and there's food is medicine movement, like all these different reasons why people just want to understand what is in their food. And so the consumer problem has just continued to grow and grow even since we started this day one. So that's the consumer side. I'll pass you on the restaurant side.
And on the restaurant side, I think ultimately this problem has been something that continues to grow and continues to just be handled mainly through manual. So training your staff or labeling your menu. And not just physical menus, but also online ordering, right? So most of the major online ordering platforms have the ability to tag your menu. But what restaurant, with everything else going on, has the time to go in and manually tag every single one of your menu dishes? And not to mention, it's actually very limited, because not only is it limited to, let's say, the top 8 allergens, but it's also limited from how this actually needs to work correctly, because it's tied to the menu item and not to the modifier. Yeah. And the modifier is ultimately where it's most important, because if you can easily not put the cheese on that sandwich, then we want to know that information. But if the cheese is cooked within whatever, if it's in there and you can't prepare that dish without it, then it can't be modified. And ultimately, that's really where we realize that all of these kind of solutions on the restaurant side are all short-term. They're putting a ton of pressure on the staff.
Yeah, that was where I was going with it, Erica, is last night, again, we got a twice-baked potato. Somebody at the table got a twice-baked potato, but in the twice-baked potato, it had green onions. And the staff member said, are you allergic to the green onions because they're mixed into the deal, or do you just not? Do you have a preference? And it turned into this whole discussion table side, which was great, quite frankly, because most times they'd be like, yeah, and they probably would just deliver you that twice baked potato, or they tell you, I'm sorry, you can't have the twice baked potato. And so there's a lot of potential there. This happened to be a high dollar. There's four of us, and I think we spent $500 for dinner. So it wasn't a cheap meal. So it was a higher end dining vendor dinner. But I promise you, at some of those other brands that you were talking about, you're not getting these staff members that are able to do this. And the other piece, I guess, Dylan, is my son grew up playing baseball with somebody that had celiac, and Chase was never able to go out with us to team meals. Like his mom just wouldn't let him go with us. So he wouldn't go on travel tournaments. He wouldn't, because she never felt comfortable enough that he as a consumer could consume product while he was out, I guess. Is that typical experience that you hear about people?
100%. And like the super users on the consumer side are always the moms of kids with food allergies, because those are the people that absolutely care about this issue on the consumer side the most. But in one way, you can't, like, the amount of times I've got sick after eating in rest, like so many over the years. Even when there's a stat that came out, I think, in a report earlier this year, which said that 54% of the time when an allergy incident occurs, it's after the staff have been notified. So it's not just a case of they're not communicating. It's like they're telling the staff, but there's two main reasons the staff can't deal with it. One is the restaurant don't have the information documented in the first place. That staff member has no way of actually answering the question because it's not documented. How are they supposed to know? Or secondly, the staff, as is the case with a lot of chains, and it's tends to be staff that are part-time, casual, not properly trained. They just don't understand that it even matters in the first place. And they don't understand the consequences of guessing or not making sure that they do give accurate information. And that's why I think there's been a 400% increase in food allergy lawsuits in the last few years, because these incidents keep happening.
What I do also though want to add, because I know your audience is a lot of restaurant owners who are probably like, I care. But the part that I know people don't talk about as much that is really challenging is it's not that easy to document this data, right? So a lot of the back of house solutions, the more we dug into this, and we were hoping that, okay, we work with and we do partner with some of the great inventory solutions like Cogswell, Knees, Margin Edge. But when you look in the back end of a lot of these solutions, it's still on the restaurant to properly document your recipes and make sure that you have all of your inventory in that recipe form. And unless you have the recipes and then you have the specific products. And so it's critically important for us to do our jobs correctly to know, for example, in the aioli, what type of mayo you use. Because if that mayo has soybean oil, that's important to someone who has a soy allergy. Some don't. And so just writing mayo doesn't get the job done. And so we've taken shortcuts, and I don't blame restaurants. Like it's a lot of reasons, right? It's the software that's built. You didn't necessarily need the product, or the product SKUs change frequently. And so it's too difficult to keep that. And so we've taken these shortcuts as an industry that has left us in this situation where you just don't have the data in one place. And so that's really what we focus on, is how do we help restaurant operators make this much, much easier by going where the recipes exist today, where the products and ingredients, where they're buying their products. And we tie that together, leveraging AI to be able to make this a much more seamless process for them to document it by ingredient so that we're able to get that information to the consumer.
So I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that, Erica, then. So how does that even function? Going back to this restaurant that, again, is making this twice-baked potato. It tastes fantastic, by the way. But at the same time, I don't know what was in there. And if I had a food allergy and there was potentially some form of something I was allergic to, I promise you, it didn't say it on the consumer level menu. There might have been 4 or 5. It was twice baked potato with green onions and cheese and bacon. But if they had mixed in sour cream or butter or something else into that twice baked potato, it didn't show it in the recipe because that was just part of what they do. And so a lot of times, at least I've been in the restaurant space for a long time, they will do these things because this is how they've always done it. Nobody's ever told them that you've got to ensure that you're using, and that you're even using the proper mayonnaise, because sometimes they're going to grab whatever's available, or they're going to get their broadliner's going to drop off whatever's available on the truck because they did a substitute without talking to them about it. And so I'd love for you to talk through, as you guys engage with restaurant brands. AI is fantastic. I'm glad we didn't get more than 15 minutes into the show before we started talking about how AI is going to solve all of the world's problems. But at the same time, it still takes humans, and it still takes creating these recipes. So I'd love for you to walk us through, what does that look like? Talk us through, what does that look like when you engage with a brand to start with?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will caveat the AI side of things. People always say, "It's like with AI, you can easily take a picture of food and know what's in it. You can take a picture of that or that potato you had last night, and it should." And I'm always
Uh-huh.
like, "In what world? Like the AI is built off of data, and
Uh-huh.
ultimately, that's what we're building out is this data infrastructure layer." So the way it works is when we work with a restaurant, there is a very big difference between larger chains and the small businesses. Unfortunately, and a lot of it just makes sense, right? A chain is a chain because they've got replicated recipes, they've got
Mhm.
control on their supply chain, so it's typically a lot better documented. They typically have the exact recipes, they've got the same suppliers which they're buying from, and so they're usually they do have an inventory management system, either a crunch time or a restaurant 365. They'll have that recipe documented, typically published. They'll have PDFs. There's laws, obviously, for the larger chains that they have to disclose more information than smaller restaurants. So we'll basically take that information, their product list, what they're buying, their menu, the recipes, and then we break that down. And so we ingest that data. We basically break down recipes into sub recipes. So to specifically speak to that example on that potato, the twice baked potato, most likely there's a sub recipe in there, which
Yep.
is like what they do to make it delicious, adding in the scallions.
The sauce.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
So there's
sauce, the salt, the pepper, all of it. Yeah.
exactly. And so that's where we'll pull the information so that and sometimes if it's a more fine dining, smaller restaurant, that is part of the work is they have to document that. And it's okay. Like the changes that can happen, it makes sense. But ultimately where we say it is the industry's so scared because it's not perfect to document it. But by not documenting it at all, people are literally dying. Like
Yeah.
this is a health issue at this point. And so what we encourage is let's document it. And then as you make changes or there are substitutions that happen, we have recurring checks that we make sure in case there are any changes. But ultimately, we give here is what is intended to be in this dish, the reflection of as it is today. And that is what we tag on the back end. And that's important because the other thing most chefs also say to me is, I don't want my recipe and we don't share that information.
Yep.
We tag it in the back end, and all the consumer sees is if that dish contains an ingredient that they can't have, just so that, or they can modify, just so that they have that information. And we still encourage consumers, if you have an allergy, you still need to let the chef know because we're not trying to cause any sort of false sense. We still want to make sure that conversation occurs, but it should be after they're just verifying, I saw that, I just want to make sure I have an allergy. We're much faster. The operations aren't slowed down. It's just going to make us a lot faster as an industry. And I think consumers will feel a lot more comfortable, included, and hopefully safer when they dine out.
And just the other thing to add over the top of that is this is coming anyway,
Yeah,
right?
well, that was where I was going to go next. It's just, I'm sure, unfortunately, and again, I've spent my entire life in the restaurant industry. Oftentimes it takes legislation or it takes something in order to get them to move off the mark because there's 700,000 estimated restaurants just in the United States, outside of nationwide, worldwide, all of that. And so Dylan, is that where it's going? Is it going to a place where, a long time, you guys happen to be based in California, I believe, they had the whole food labeling and kind of the calorie counting thing if you had a certain size. And I know that's also a big piece of what's coming to try and get transparency in restaurants. Is the same thing happening? Are they going to be forced to do this outside of the fact that it's just good business? To what you said, Erica, you're not killing people, you're not hurting people, you're not sending them home sick because they ate something that they didn't know. But is that really where it's going, Dylan?
It is. And even just before I go into that, like over the top of that, those are obvious kind of benefits that you just mentioned. But what we've actually seen, the benefits of having this information documented and made clear to the consumer, it's also you're attracting in all these consumers that previously would not go to your restaurant. Yes. They didn't trust you could cater to them. And then it's not just them, it's their families, their friends, their coworkers. Now, all of a sudden, the team dinner can be at that restaurant because the celiac and the nut allergy person feel safe going there. It's also the data. When you have a digital solution that manages this, instead of that tableside conversation that you referred to, where that allergen that your friend had, that's a lost data point. If someone puts this into a digital solution at the end of every month, you can look at it as a restaurant chain and say, we had 20,000 gluten-free and 10,000 vegan and 4,000 keto. We actually have no keto-friendly option on our menu. That's something we should go and look at. And we can also tie those dietary profiles to loyalty. And now we can market to those consumers. We know Dylan is celiac. It's World Gluten Free Day. It's 10% off. Like these are all the things you can do with that data as well. So it's more even than just the ops and the risk mitigation. But to your question specifically, that's what's happening. So Europe now, most European countries.
Yeah, I was going to ask about Europe because
Yeah,
my parents had traveled there and they said that there was something on the bottom of the menu they were trying to explain to us. So I'd love for you guys
yeah.
to educate our listeners on that.
Well, yeah, EU regs, and let's take Ireland, the UK as just an easy example. 14 major allergens in those countries versus 9 here. Every menu, every org that serves food, even if it's a food truck, has to label for the top 14 allergens. And how they've typically done it is they have a key at the bottom: 1 gluten, 2 wheat, 3 eggs, 4 shellfish, and then every menu item will have the numbers beside it if it contains that allergen. So it's messy, I would say. It's not like aesthetically pleasing. And obviously, every time anything changes, they have to reprint the menus and the menu boards or whatever. But it is accurate and it is transparent. And that's, I suppose, been the starting point without going down the digital route. What's been happening here, and I suppose the most advanced, is in California with the SB 68 bill. That's been going through the kind of legislative process here for the last several months. It passed the Senate unanimously. I think it was 32-0 about 2 months ago. It went through Assembly Health. It went through Assembly Appropriations. It's in the main assembly right now. I think it's due to be heard by the end of next week. And then it goes to Gavin Newsom's desk. And what this bill mandates is that every restaurant in California label for food allergens effective 1 July 26. And our perspective on this, similar to what happened with the gig economy drivers and DoorDash and Uber Eats, and that kind of got pushed back for a while, and then eventually it passed. But this is coming. This is going to be required. It'll either happen right now or it will happen in 6 months or 12 months. But it's the trend. It's popping up in other states as well. Like I said, California is the most advanced, but the beginnings of this are now happening in some other states on the East Coast. You have Maha is also pushing through all sorts of stuff that relates to like food dyes and chemicals and additives that all kind of ties into this as well. So all the legislative trends show this is going to be required very soon, and it's going to be required probably across the board over the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, no, and I think, and we talked about it again before we hit the record button. I love that you guys are on the leading edge of this, and there's going to be more and more people that are going to be trying to do this. The other thing that I want to double click on is for those restaurant owners out there, Erica, I'd love for you to share. It's a value add to your consumers. You become a restaurant of choice when you do this. Yes, it's hard work. Yes, you've got to have discipline. Yes, you've got to do these things. Yes, you've got to pay for software to help you with it. And it pays off. The increase in volume from people that are wanting to dine here because of it is pretty significant. I'd love for you to share a little bit about what you're seeing, the value to the restaurateurs as they implement this solution, and kind of how not only is it helping give confidence to the staff, but it's also giving confidence to the consumers and ultimately driving top line sales.
Exactly. I think what you've seen now is an evolution of everyone is looking up the restaurant before they're going in. At this point now, you're looking up the menu. It's the new veto vote. I think it was the veto vegetarian back when everyone added a vegetarian option on the menu just so that in case you're driving by. It's the same thing now with if you don't have an option for someone who has an allergy or dietary need, or they don't know that there's something there that they can eat, they will choose another option. I deal with it every day, getting lunch with him. My brother growing up, it was similar. We had to look at the menu and see if there were options. And so the reality is, if you give this information up front, you are going to attract more people to come in who know that they have options. Once they come in, you are now, instead of bogging down your staff, waiting for them to come to the table, you are able to give them this information up front. They are ready when the waiter comes over if it's full service, or they're able to see what they can have if it's a kiosk or it's a digital board. We'll have QR codes so that they don't wait until they get to the register, if you're a fast casual or QSR, to now ask the question. The amount of times we've also seen this at lunch at some of the biggest chains out there, that I'm horrified that they don't have the answer and they're having to hold up a whole line behind us because they have to ask.
My favorite is they'll have to go get this binder out of the back to figure out, really, this is the way that we're working in 2025?
Exactly.
And sure, there are some annoying consumers out there who love being the center of attention, and they like the chef and the manager and everyone there and the table side conversation you said. But the reality is, most people, myself included, I just want to order my food like everyone else. I don't want to fuss. I don't want this hubbub. I just want them to give me the food that I can eat. And so for most consumers we see as well, they appreciate the fact that they have the information now. And sure, I'm still going to say, and by the way, I'm celiac, just so you know, so you can let the kitchen know. But it's not the 5-minute conversation before that to figure out what I can even order in the first place. And then over the top of that, Erica talked about the attracting consumers, but there is no more loyal consumer than a food allergy consumer. They
Yeah.
find it so hard to find places that they can trust that when they do find some place, they just keep going back again and again. And you could probably vouch that we eat in the same 3 places, like when we go over, because they're the places around here that it's me driving it, because I'm like, the 3 of them can cater for me perfectly. They know what they're doing. We're going back. And that's
Yeah.
what happens.
And so I'd love for you, Dylan, since you've been talking about the consumer side, and I think Erica just alluded to it. We talked about what happens within the restaurant, but how as a consumer do you most often engage with these things? So that's great. You've got these 3 places that are near your office or near your home or whatever. And now I'm in a different city. Now I'm at a trade show. Now I'm traveling. As a consumer, talk me through what is the consumer experience to go find these types of allergens out on the menu if they're on your guys' platform? And then what does it really even look like when they're not? Because it's probably pretty miserable for you to travel and have to go eat out when you're traveling.
Yeah. So if you take the standard consumers, so take us out of it for a second, right? I'll tell you what consumers normally do. There's a few things. One, they don't eat out. They decide we're going to cook, we're going to go to Whole Foods and buy, and we're going to bring it to the hotel or with Airbnb. And that's what we're going to do because it's hard. That's one. 2, they ring or email before and get someone on the phone to try and get the information before they go. Same, in my old career, I remember having to do it a few times in a work capacity where there was a 20-person team lunch, and my partner was like, there's 4 different allergies here. I haven't a clue where we're going, like, how are we going to figure out where we can bring the 20 people? And so it's email and blah, blah, and then the restaurants obviously having to deal with that. Or else it's, as we said, when you're there in person, getting the manager, getting whoever in there and having the conversation. So that's the, like, how you deal with it today in or without.
And are non-technologically
In and
advanced
on, yeah.
areas.
With us, how, again, we manage it is you walk in off the street to a restaurant. You like have never heard of Foodini before, but there's a QR on the menu board or on the physical menu saying allergy dietary needs scan here. You scan the QR, pops up a URL to create your dietary profile. We have over 100 different selections. You create your dietary profile, picking whatever is unique to you, and it shows you the personalized menu instantly. 5 seconds. And that is the experience. Equally, as I think I alluded to earlier, we put a digital button on the website as well, which says allergies, dietary needs, click here, triggers the same experience so that someone knows before they can go there. And with the online ordering side of things, we're in the process of powering that same solution within their ecosystem as well, so that wherever you're coming to the menu from, you can still get that same level of transparency and personalization so that you just have confidence placing your order. Because that's what happens to a lot of consumers. I go on Uber Eats or I go on Grubhub or DoorDash and I'm scrolling and I'm clicking. I'm like, I really want this. And I just don't know. I just don't know if it's suitable. So now I'm not going to order. I'm going to walk down to the grocery store again instead. And these are like, it's just so much lost revenue for online ordering and for the restaurants.
Yeah. And you talked about it, the fact that it's such a large percentage of the population that has some form, again, somewhat ignorant. I do have one of my 4 kids doesn't have any allergens, but struggles to eat certain things and doesn't care for certain things. And so he has preferences, and his is more about preference than it is even about anything. And so we do end up, when he's in town, he happens to be in college now, so our palate expands quite a bit when he's gone. But when he's home, it's like that we eat at the same 4 or 5 restaurants because that's where he'll eat. And I know that.
But it's bigger again. Even I remember the first time I dug into this properly, like the number, like if I break down the half the population that I referred to earlier, you have 33 million Americans with a diagnosed food allergy. So that's 1 in 10 straight away diagnosed allergy. You have another 50 million that fall into the intolerance bucket. Dairy intolerant, lactose intolerant, wheat intolerant, gluten intolerant. It's not an allergy technically, but they feel unwell if they eat it. And then you have 70 million, which fall into the vegan, vegetarian, keto, low FODMAP, paleo, low carb, lacto-ovo, like you name it, right? And so again, I think it's just much, much bigger than most restaurateurs realize.
The other stat that I was pretty surprised by that impacts the way we handle this is 40% of people who have an allergy have more than one. And so that is one of the most significant reasons why the current solutions are just really not effective. These PDF allergen matrices, So now you're telling consumers, you're holding up the line, handing them this binder or this matrix, and now they've got to go down. Okay, I've got egg here, and then but I also need to look at the row and that's where it's just we're
It's
making
hard
it
enough to pick a menu item anyway, and then you figure out that you can't eat it.
exactly. So that's why, and a lot of it though is also advancements in technology, like the fact that we're able to make this a bit more easy for the restaurant to be able to let us work with your back of house or work with the existing documentation you have, and the documenting on the back end and just exposing what the consumer needs to know, we think is the right balance here, where we cover 150 plus constantly growing different diets and allergens. Ultimately, as long as we're documenting the ingredients, our ability to cater to different needs, preferences, and diets can continue to grow and grow, especially as all these consumer health tech platforms are telling everyone what you should and shouldn't eat based on your biometrics and your blood and all of that.
That was this guy last night. He was telling me about, he did his blood work and his stool sample, and this is what I have to eat. I'm like, okay, dude, what you do, you. I don't care. There's green onions and that, but I'm teasing about it. Erica, one last thing. You mentioned it earlier, but I'd love for you to dig in a little bit. There's obviously the main ingredient, but then you've got the components that go along with it, the modifications, the sides.
Yep.
I'd love for you to talk, how do you solve that? Because you know what? A chicken sandwich that's on on flatbread that doesn't have the gluten, not that big of a deal, but then I happen to get fries that happen to have flour on them or whatever
Yep.
it might be. I'd love for you to talk through, how do you guys solve for that? Because it is a very complex matrix when you have an ingredient, and it's not just the main, it's the main plus the two sides that come along with it that also need to now be included in this conversation.
Yeah. I think the best way to give you an example, a restaurant we onboarded last week that it was a single location that does a pretty good job, I will say, in terms of how he documents his recipes. He uses Craftable, and in Craftable has recipes documented. Within those recipes, those I also tie to inventory. And so with us, basically, we took his menu, and I guess I'll break it down from the top. So menu, it comes first. With menu, we want the data from the POS as much as possible, because that's where we also will take your modifiers.
Okay.
And so toast was his POS. And so toast, menu, and then we could see the modifier data in there. And that way, to answer your question, we know what can be added or removed because that's already set up in your POS.
Yep.
We then layer on the recipes. And so the recipes were pulled from Craftable. If they're not in Craftable, they can also be documented. We'll get Excel files all the time. That's okay.
Oh,
Exactly.
hopefully that's where you use AI to filter through that stuff. But sorry, I'll let you guys keep going.
Exactly. That is exactly. We try to get some help, but ultimately we take it from where it exists. And so the recipes, then we break that down into the products. Products can either be a ingredient, a raw ingredient, lettuce, or it can be a composite ingredient or a product that has sub recipe. And so that would be a product that
Heinz ketchup
buy,
or like a branded product in essence. Yeah.
And so we then break that down. And so the good part of what we've been building is a product database that allows us to make this really easy, where you tell us you're buying Heinz ketchup. We know the ingredients in Heinz ketchup because we've built up that product in our database. So we automatically tag it for all those ingredients. And then we automatically tag each one of those ingredients for all the relevant diets and allergens. And so really with the restaurant side of it, it's just that menu, recipes, and inventory. And then we take it from there and we show them the dietary tag menu. We test it out, obviously. A lot of restaurants also use it to train the staff.
I think that once you've got it documented, now being able to go back and educate those staff members, not only on sharing with their guests, but also from a safety perspective.
It was funny, our first customers, when we were going through feedback in terms of how it was being received by customers and staff, it was already positive. But one of his inputs was that his biggest surprise unlock was culturally. He was like, the fact that this now lives on the menu and that we, like, all the staff know it's consumer facing and the chefs, etc., means that they just implicitly are taking it more seriously. And they're double checking things with it in mind. It just culturally made it important in a way because it was front of mind now.
No different than when you throw a camera in the kitchen. You're like, people are going to behave. Even if you never look at the film, they're going to behave better because they know that somebody's watching.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, I love that. We're getting close to time, I guess. Is there anything I missed, guys, that you guys would want to share with our audience? It feels like we've gone from both consumer, restaurant side. Erica, you talked about this whole fear that people have that my recipes are going to get out to the world. I know you guys hide that behind the firewall to make sure that it's just the ingredients. It's not how do you make it? And that's the secret sauce, is how do you all put it together and whatnot. But is there anything else we missed?
I think just if I was to surmise, it's something that sometimes restaurateurs can find a bit daunting, especially if they haven't gone to the effort of documenting this before. And I suppose we've spent time making sure that our approach makes it as simple as possible for them. All we typically ask for is give us the data you have. We will review it all, package it, and come back with the queries that we need answers for. It's typically one onboarding call to like verify that information, and we're good. So it's not this convoluted long process for a restaurateur that's going to take them days. It typically is an hour or two of their time to actually get to the point that we have it fully verified. We can work with SMB, we work with mid-market, we can work with enterprise. As I mentioned, we can work with stadiums, with universities, with schools. So anywhere that food is served, our service works. And again, we've spent the time making sure that it's as seamless as possible for the customers. That's, I think, just something worth pointing out.
The other thing from a restaurant operator perspective is by doing this work, if it's not something that you already have documented, documenting your recipes pays in dividends for lots of other areas of your business, right? Understanding your COGS, understanding what truly each menu item cost is, organized. It's not just to have the benefit of being able to help consumers know what's in their food. There's a lot of other benefits that we find, which is why it's so nice to partner with the inventory management systems, because ultimately the better documented your recipes are and the more we can help track your ingredients, the better operator you are in terms of understanding your restaurant and your back of house.
I love it. So how do people get in touch? How do people get engaged? Where do they go to find you guys, other than they can sit and listen to the podcast over and over again? But how do they get engaged and learn if this is the right solution for what they're looking for?
Yeah, our website is generally a good place to start, foodini.co. And it also we have a separate page for each segment as well. So restaurant, stadium, microenvironment, etc. So have a look there. We have some case studies on our resources page just so people can maybe dig in and have a bit of a closer look. There's a 1-minute video that kind of explains as well the kind of process that might be worth running through and a bit of a visual of what it actually looks like for a consumer. And then email us directly. It's Dylan@getfoodini.com. It's Erica@getfoodini.com as well. We'd love to hear from anyone with questions or if they're interested in using us.
I love it. There's a rumor that there's a YouTube page that I might have been on and giving you guys some views on the YouTube page. So I knew what both of you guys look like before I jumped on today, watching the YouTube to make sure that I was ready for today's interview. So thank you guys for creating this. Again, I love talking to entrepreneurs that are really scratching an itch that they see out there. Obviously for you, Dylan, very personal because this is a life experience. And again, like I said to you, Erica, there's something about food startup techs that are fun and exciting, but also it really does solve a lot of problems and make the world a better place when we can do these things. So thank you guys for sharing your story. Thank you guys for creating the product. To our listeners, guys, like I said at the onset, I know you guys got lots of choices, so thanks for hanging out and make it a great day.